Anyway, in the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell you I'm not an economist either, and it'll become really evident during my talk. So we'll go from there. I'm going to talk about innovation and about new models and a little bit about the future and what that could look like. But I thought I'd start a little bit just to say that I also, for many years, worked for the federal government. I was there for 22 years as a bench scientist. And as I tell people, I even tried management, but I never inhaled. And one day back in 2007, decided to pack it in and start a new organization called the Vineland Research and Innovation Center. And I'll talk a little bit about that, about what we do, and in part to create an invitation to collaborate and partner on innovation in the future. CETA is a good, I think, a good catalyst for collaboration with Europe and maybe even a few ideas about how we could build that relationship. Okay, so here's the way this talk starts. Innovation is extremely important in agriculture, and we talked a little bit about population growth this morning and feeding everybody, and we saw a lot of econometric models about how well we're going to do and how much we need. But the real truth is 10,000 years ago, agriculture itself was an innovation. And it's been disruptive cycles in innovation in agriculture that help feed ourselves, right? So we look at things and we take many things for granted, whether it's mechanization or pesticides or fertilizer or the green revolution and dwarf wheat and rice. And now we live in this age of genomics and biotechnology and what I call the age of biology. And it's all of these disruptive innovative forces that have really allowed us to produce enough food to feed ourselves. And as we move towards 2050, of course, we're going to need more technology in order to be able to do that. So innovation is not just important from an economic standpoint. It's in fact really how we feed ourselves. And the truth is that Malthus was wrong in our case. We're a rational species. And again, that's up for debate. But at the end of the day, we've been able to think our way through these things, and we're going to continue to need to do that. So innovation is a place for public investment, like the air we breathe and the water we drink. And the key message in this is that what's more important than all of that is that we get it right, because I think the models that have held us in good stead to this point, that were really developed back in the late 1880s, are really not the models that are going to take us into the next millennium at all. We won't be able to feed ourselves in the back of a random innovation process. We need to be more directed and more rational. So, key drivers in our organization, what do we think about when we think about the big picture? We heard already a lot about population growth, but that's a big fact. And what does that mean? That means we need productivity growth. That means that technology needs are going to intensify. There's things that are changing, particularly in this country. We've got different demographic shifts. Not only are people urbanizing and getting older, we have a huge shift in ethnicity as well that can be an enormous advantage if we look at it the right way, but it's going to change the look of this country and it's going to change the food we eat. And then we have an undercurrent of this thing that I toss everything into a bucket called trust in food, and that's local, that's healthy and sustainable. All of those things together are very important to people. And so how are we going to deliver all of that food with all of these things in mind, right? Giving people what they want at the same time. So a little bit about this new organization and why it was created. So you can see we've got these big challenges in front of us, and we had an old way of doing things. And so in 2007, when I started my job as CEO, there was just me, and there'd been a study done, as studies are done, you know. That's how it goes. There's a study, here it is, do what it says, right? Which was really, build a new innovation place. We weren't really sure what's wrong, but, go and fix it. But the prevailing thinking was this, that private sector research was right and public sector research was wrong. And I, as a new CEO, was to make that choice, which was obvious, and then go back to the public sector, tell them they sucked, and ask for money. Right? How did that go? You can imagine, right? So at the end of the day, the real truth is this, that's a false choice, right? That the private sector commercializes research really well. The public sector actually does research really well. And if you're going to build a new organization, what's really stopping you from combining the best parts of both of those models together in one organization and saying, okay, we're going to do research and we're going to commercialize it, and here's how it's going to work. And so out of that, you creatively resolve the tension between those two models and come up with something that's actually bigger and better than what was there before. Okay, so what comes out of that? What's our promise? So we're a results-based, independent, not-for-profit organization. We're focused on horticulture. So what's our difference? Our results are something meaningful and real. So we're looking for acres in the field and shelf space in the store. It doesn't fundamentally mean that our science is pedestrian or that we're doing just applied research or anything like that, only that we see right to the end, right? So for us, shelf space in the library is not an achievement. It's a milestone, right? It says your work is good, you're heading in the right direction, but what you really want is something that people are interested in. Our horticulture includes a whole value chain from producers through consumers, the old relationship, scientist and grower. And we didn't really care what consumers thought or what processors thought. We were really just there for that group, and that's who we served. And the problem is, of course, that if you don't float everybody's boat in the value chain, your innovations go nowhere. So you really have to include everybody. We're a not-for-profit. So that's an interesting construct. That means we're stakeholder-focused, right? We're not here for educational reasons. We're not here for political reasons. We're really here to support that industry. And in Canada, there's 163,000 not-for-profits, and when you have a level of public investment here and a level of need here, we fill that gap with not-for-profits. That's how we do it. So it's a very good way to create focus. We're also independent, so government nor university is neither director nor member of our corporation. Not that we don't take your money, right? We do work on your behalf and deliver services on your behalf. But at the end of the day, we've got a policy-driven business board and some very good people to help lead the organization, and it creates a very different context, and that board reflects the whole value chain, and of course, those values and that concept filters through the whole organization. So how does it work? This is just the simple process right here. You have 3 critical requirements for every project and every program, and really we use a process called opportunity analysis to evaluate that. So you have an idea. Is it really an idea worth doing? Is it going to create impact? Is it going to be big enough? Who cares? And who's better off at the end of the day? And can you actually validate that? We got to have the right science and science partnerships. You know, we've all got our degrees and PhDs, and so we're fairly good at doing that part. And then the third absolutely critical piece is the right commercial partnerships. Because at the end of the day, we're an innovation organization, aren't we, right? We don't manufacture robots. We don't build greenhouses. We're not a seed company or a grocery store. And so the only way that you can really deliver innovation in our model all the way through to the end is with those business partners in at the beginning of the project, right? Because if you bring them in at the end, you typically get the context wrong, right? Because you did have that idea when you were watching the Food Network after the news 2 nights ago. And the problem is 10 years after you finish the work and you go, look, and they go, well, do you have that in blue? And you go, oh, really? So that creates context. So having those relationships up front is absolutely key. So greenhouse industry, we have a very big greenhouse industry in Canada, and it's growing and successful. Half of it is Ontario. It's both vegetables and flowers, but it's a very large, very successful thing. So our total product sales in Canada were over $2.5 billion in 2011. And in Niagara, in the region we're in alone, there's over $240 million worth of farm gate there. So it's big. It is bigger than the wine industry by 4-fold. Very quiet bunch of people, though. They don't really advertise that, so it's interesting from that standpoint as well. So, and where are they at? So there's various phases, as these, at least in my mind anyways, and this might be the proof you need that I'm not an economist. But the way I look at it is this. At the very beginning, when a new industry starts, you just basically import technology and use it directly. And then you start to import it and you start to modify it. And then the third phase, the place where all the value is the creation of new knowledge. So that's exactly where our industry is at the end of phase 2, right? So we've got a lot of built in Europe, for Europe technology that's a round peg in that square hole. And we need to start to build things ourselves. So really the value of the greenhouse industry is yet to be fully realized. It's not just the production, right? It's also the technology base for that industry. That's what you want, because you can sell that everywhere in the world. even when your tomatoes start to get too expensive for some places. So the idea would be, as a part of this, is this invitation now to partner and collaborate in this final phase. You share in building that technology base with knowledge that you have in your country, levering against our manufacturing sector, and market access and all the rest of that stuff. And in that way, rather than losing your share of long-term upside, you get to be part of it, right? So I think that's a concept. And so what we're doing, again, as an organization, is starting to build that technology base. So we really don't have a focused research greenhouse facility that really parallels commercial production systems. And so we're building this large kind of 1 acre commercial scale greenhouse that's really about, again, boosting our greenhouse industry up now in terms of technology and driving more growth into that industry. And again, starting to create job transformation. Do we want to have the $10.50 tomato picker jobs, or do we want the $28 and $25 and $30 an hour manufacturing jobs that go with building these systems or engineering software, on and on and on. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to build that sector and take advantage of it. So why do we partner? Obviously, to share risk and reward, right? So the more risk you can spread across your partners, the better off you're going to do. You have to share the rewards at the end of the day, but you're very more likely to be successful. You capture value from spillovers, right? So our greenhouse industry is a spillover from investment in Holland in greenhouse technologies. Just exactly it. You participate a lot in that, and I think you can build more. I think partnering accelerates innovation and expands market channels. You have just more relationships and more places to go, more minds and more ideas. Innovation happens, of course, at the cross-section between those disparate disciplines and organizations, and so you try to create that. And not only that, you can launch projects from anywhere when you have partners, inside or outside your organization. Best practices, it seems straightforward, but not everybody gets this. You have to be open. Not every organization is. Where normally, I don't know, where I went to school, I was taught to compete with everybody as an individual. It was really about me alone competing with everyone else, right? And my job was to grind them all into the dirt and get more grant money than everyone else, and that was what success looked like. But I think that we need to change the way we think and be way more open, and your organizations need to encourage partnering. It's got to be a systemic part of what you do. You've got to be strategic. It isn't about cutting and pasting something into that box in the grant, right? It's really about, who do I really need to work with me on this project? Who's going to take it the furthest? Who can deliver, right? You got to start at the beginning, and I talked about stop and go. So at the beginning of the project, you want to bring your partners in. That brings relevance. And again, you don't have this problem of having to stop, find a partner to move something to the next phase. They're built right in, and things go faster. You got to share everybody's, as I said, you got to float everybody's boat, right? If there's somebody in the value chain that's not going to win, it's not going to work for you. You got to communicate, right? So throughout the project's life cycle, everybody's got to talk. And of course, in our organization, we have examples of how to do it well and how to do it not so well, right? And so we know how it works. And the other thing you have to believe and understand is not everybody can, right? So I want to collaborate with CSIS on computer security. Well, they're just not that kind of organization. They're not very open to partnering. They're doing their own thing. We'll leave them alone, right? So not all organizations and institutions are going to be up for this, so you got to be able to accept that. Because the way it works is this. And so for the econometrics people, I made this up. There is no real data. There is no trend. It's just the way it is. So all of you have heard of the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Well, it applies to partnering in a very similar way. So as you try to build those relationships, you cold call those people. They don't want to talk to you. It's denial. And we are, all of us, good at getting to the next step, right? Getting everybody angry. You know you're making progress. That's good, right? But you need to be able to move past that stage, right? And get to that bargaining phase. So you've got to understand what value you bring and what value you're going to bring to them and how they can fit into this and why it's good for everybody. And you'll get to that next phase of acceptance, right? So just a couple of examples. How am I doing? Several, however many that is. Okay, so opportunities, and again, when I think about biotechnologies, we talked a little bit about GMO, and of course there are many ways to skin that cat, if you don't like that analogy, but I was brought up in a mining town. Anyhow, so we have a platform called Reverse Genetics. There's a company in Holland called KeyGene that practices a similar but different invention to ours. But again, I think this is a key way to start to deliver technology into our agriculture industries that doesn't trigger the same negative emotions as genetic engineering does, but has the potential to certainly solve a large portion of the problems that we try to address with transgenic plants. So I think we also have a more open mind about some of those technologies. So you in Holland, for example, have developed a ton of biotechnologies that probably will never see the light of day, at least as long as I'm alive, given your current regulatory outlook. But there's lots of opportunity to deploy that technology here. And then I think the other problem is that now that a single genetic engineering trait costs $163 million to get from start to finish, I think that was the estimate I heard at ABIC a little while back, horticulture will never see any of those technologies. We need them, but the costs are way too high. We don't have net present values over $200 million in almost any crop. So these kinds of approaches, I think, can really make a difference. So I think there's an opportunity there. Another place where I see a lot of opportunity is in diversity, and I talked about it a little bit, but you know, we get now, I think the quotas are 280,000 new Canadians every year. You know, just under 50% of them come to Ontario, for example, and about 80% are either from India or China. And of course, they bring with them their own food traditions. And of course, I think our agriculture, our response to those traditions is just really to try to feed them turnips, right? We're not responding to this opportunity at all. And so part of what we've done is to ask people what they want, right? So what do you eat? What are those key vegetables? Out of that is a list. That list becomes a crop adaptation trial. That trial becomes a short list of things like okra or eggplant, and the eggplant isn't Sicilian eggplant, it's either Indian eggplant or Chinese eggplant, which are really quite different than that style. And again, building your way through that, partnering with grocery distribution in order to move that stuff through. And of course, this is your Trojan horse into those much larger markets in India and China. Once you understand what people want, you can feed them here, you can feed them at home too. Because again, we have our pristine brand, food safety, all of that stuff is much in demand, and I think that there's monster opportunity here in agriculture broadly to lever diversity into competitive advantage. Another place, you know, and again, my base for this is more narrow than all of agriculture, but certainly in horticulture, the absolutely key constraint is cost of production, and really that cost of production is really all about cost of labor. And while we do have offshore worker programs, and of course we all know that those are under pressure, those do not solve your labor cost problems, they just solve your labor supply problem. And you're still way out at a point where you're not cost competitive. And so when you look into that and you realize that you know, Jethro Tull invented the seed drill back in the late 1700s, and combines came along in the late 1800s. I might be wrong about that. In horticulture, that didn't happen. We still have large tracts of migrant labor come every year to pick vegetables and pick apples and all of that kind of stuff. So we need to automate. We have you know, in Ontario, in southwestern Ontario, massive automation industry, fabrication, engineering, all of that stuff. It's all built really to support the automobile manufacturing industry, but that levers very nicely into horticulture. If you want to build those machines, those folks are very, very capable. And now that the six-axis robot, which is really going to be the combine harvester for horticulture, are $38,000 a throw, there was really an opportunity to build machines that can automate a lot of repetitive processes and drive out cost right now and right away. So just to finish up the last slide, a couple of opportunities. So I think the idea of joint innovation projects, they start that partnership process right at the beginning, and it sets everything up for the long term. So even if we aren't collaborating now and things that are already in the pipe, we can start that. I told you that I didn't think Made in Europe for Europe isn't sustainable for us in the long run, that our technology needs are moving past that. So we need our own custom solutions. And the other thing, and having been a bench scientist for a long time, there was always this huge interest in collaboration. But, the real and cynical truth of what really drives collaboration in research is money. And if joint programs, we have one with the Canada-Israel Binational Ag Research and Development Fund. I think, again, if you want to create something to drive innovation under CETA, a joint program that actually had money in it for both sides, for these kinds of programs of joint interest, you would go a long, long way to really setting up for the long run and building success and long-term success out of that trade agreement. So this is my final sort of piece. So the how did we make our 96 people at Vineland into 9,600? We did it by partnering, right? So the old model, when I was a scientist, I love me, right? This is all about me. I'm going to have my own MBA and my own lawyer. You know how it works, Al. I'm going to have everybody. They're all going to work for me, and they're going to be in my lab, and I'm going to build an empire. I'm going to be in some kind of matrix that I don't like, right? Someplace. And that's over. You really just can't do it. You can't be effective. You can't be fast enough. And it's really about partnering outside, right? So you got to partner with your own staff and your organization, get out of your silo, suppliers, government, university, industry, and then that partnership lab where you move from the lab is my world to the world is my lab. Then you're big, then you're effective, then you have impact. So that's my invitation. Thank you for your attention, and thanks, Dave, for inviting me.